You are listening to the Two and Out CFL podcast, a proud member of the Canadian Football Podcast Network.
Grab some poutine and a double-double. It's time for the Two and Out CFL podcast.
He's got it! Oh, baby!
Every week, Travis Kura.
That's Grey Cup me, which is a different person.
And Brazilian Tide.
Hunters are people too.
Talk fantasy football, bring you the latest in CFL news, and sprinkle in a little bit of nonsense.
Oh, nearly intercepted it is! And it's over!
Ready, set, hunt!
Hey, thanks for clicking play on this episode of the Two and Out CFL podcast. It is our West Division preview. We'll be talking to Matt Baker of the BC Lions, Ryan Ballantyne of the Go Stamps Go podcast, Andrew from the Turf District, Safimod from the Piffles podcast, and Ryan Cooper from the Canadian Football Countdown. It is a busy show. Now, you'll notice that Ty is not a part of every episode here. But that's what happens when you get unexpected visits from your mother. I don't know about you. If I hear the doorbell ringing, toilet brushes out, I'm doing a 40-second clean, and usually I have to get dressed before I answer.
So you are just like your father.
Yeah. That's the biggest annoyance I have with door knockers. Like, I don't know if it's the Boy Scouts selling popcorn or whoever coming to the door. Like, I have to get dressed, really? Well, I guess I don't have to.
Just open the door.
But hey, she showed up, and we were robbed of a cameo with Brazilian Ty's mom previewing some of these teams.
Well, she showed up just before you started. Like before the times we had set out. So it's like, well, I'm not going to kick her out. And then she needed a phone charger. And oh my God. I'm like, I'm just trying to make jerky here. Like,
the real question, how was the jerky?
it's phenomenal. I do have the last batch on the smoker right now. So we're just waiting. I got another 2.5 hours.
Wow.
And sprinkle some cayenne pepper on it and go to town. The last batch is like maple syrup, brown sugar, and Coca-Cola. Marinated in it for like 30 hours.
Whoa.
So I'm going to do like a sweet and hot.
I got to be honest, you don't strike me as a guy that can handle much spice.
That's all I want is spice.
Oh. I guess as
like,
you get older.
Like habanero, I love the heat, hate the taste. So like, it's kind of weird.
I love the habanero's got that little bit of a, I don't know, little fruitiness in it.
Yeah, and you know how I am with fruit.
But I can't handle the heat, but I still eat it because I'm an idiot.
I'll eat suicide wings at Canadian Brew House as long as I know that either I'm home the next day or along the pipeline. I know where all the outhouses are, and I'm good.
A lot of planning goes into.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I don't just do it while willy-nilly. Make sure I got at least an extra pair of socks in the truck.
Well, it's our West Division preview. We got 5 teams to talk about, so let's get underway. And joining the show now from the Canada Football Countdown podcast, it is Ryan Cooper. Hey, thanks for coming on the show, Ryan.
Hey, happy to be here, Travis. Thanks for having me. Always happy to talk some CFL football.
Yeah, and we're bringing you on to talk the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. And I got to be honest, it seems like over the past couple of years, they're becoming kind of the boring team to talk about. It's like not many changes, and I realized there was a Grey Cup loss, but I think maybe the minimal changes are the reason they've been the most successful franchise in the CFL over the past couple of years.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I think that was a big thing as well with the pandemic lost season also. You know, the 2 teams coming out of that didn't really have a whole lot of roster overhaul were the Bombers and the Ticats, if I remember correctly, who went back to the Grey Cup the year after. And that's something they've been able to hold on to is just the same core, you know, a couple pieces in and out, but by and large, the same core for the past couple of years and been able to run it back, much like the Calgary Stampeders did for many years in a row.
15-3 in 2022. It was a dominant record, but a lot of the games, they were exciting finishes. There weren't exactly dominant wins, but I think that's what makes the Bombers the Bombers. They're able to win those close games. Are we going to see as dominant of a record in 2023, or are the cracks starting to show in the Great Blue Bombers?
Well, the cracks started to show in the stadium the day after it was built, but in terms of the team itself, I think I called it last year the sloppiest 15-3 football team I've ever seen because, the record showed for it, but there were a lot of games where they pulled the rabbit out of their hat at the very last minute, and I don't think they're quite going to be at that same pace again this year. I do still have them as a strong team. I do have them leading the West Division again this year with a pretty good record there. But the question mark is always, when is it going to come crashing down, right? When is age going to catch up to them? Is they're a bit of an older team? And, they've gotten pretty lucky with injuries the last couple of years, whereas other teams haven't. So, one key injury could change things at any point. So I think they'll be, able to produce, somewhere in the 11 to 12 wins again this season, but I don't know if they're hitting that 15-3 pace.
Was there a big or a position group on the team where we're going to see the most changes coming in to the year?
Yeah, they don't have too many changes overall. Defensive back, they have a couple of pieces rotating in and out. Nick Taylor is no longer here, and Noah Hallett let go. Malcolm Thompson played some games last season as well. Terrell Ford, their draft pick last year, went off to the NFL before really getting too much involvement here in Winnipeg. So I think that's a position with Winnipeg we often see rotated each year. There's usually a couple defensive backs that go elsewhere, and then a couple new guys come in and generally play pretty well. So I think that's the kind of one of the biggest spots I look at, the changing of the guard there. You have a couple pieces here and there, big pieces they lost would be Casey Sales on the defensive line, Michael Couture on the offensive line, Greg Ellingson at wide receiver. They got a huge downgrade at that position to Kenny Lawler, but
I was like, what am I missing?
No, if you would have told me that Greg Ellingson out on the wide receiver core gets replaced by Kenny Lawler, who's arguably even better at this point in the career, I would have not seen that coming this offseason.
Well, and that's the thing with the offense. I think the Andrew Harris era of the Bombers, we got used to them, a pretty even split between run and pass, just bruising teams and wearing them down. But last year, I think maybe they got forced into more passing situations. We know Zach Collaros is a magician back there, and sometimes second and long, they are never out of a drive, a game, or anything like that. Now, Dalton Schoen comes in as the guy that kind of burst onto the scene when Kenny Lawler was in Edmonton. Now they're teammates. So it does feel like this could be a pretty high-flying offense again for the Bombers.
Yeah, they've got all the players there. I mean, you look at the list of wide receivers as a starting point. You mentioned Dalton Schoen, you mentioned Kenny Lawler. You've still got Nick Dembski. Somehow Rashid Bailey decided to come back and probably be the number 4 option.
People thought he was gone, I thought.
I think he could have gone somewhere else and maybe slotted in as a number 2, number 3 type of guy, but he took a pay cut. He wanted to stick in Winnipeg. He liked what at least so I'm told, salaries aren't public, but he took a pay cut because he wanted to stay here in Winnipeg, and he's a part of that offense. And you've got, Drew Wolotarski, Brendan O'Leary-Orange, Carlton Agadosi, Janarian Grant. I could go on and take my entire time slot to list Winnipeg Blue Bomber wide receivers here. And I don't know where they're all going to fit in on the roster. Right? Then half of these guys are not even going to get on the field unless injuries happen. So they've got the guys in place as their starters. They've got the depth there. I like Brady Oliveira leading the way at running back on offense there as well. 1,000-yard season for him last year, and that was really mostly the second half of the year for him. The first 6-7 games was pretty quiet, and a lot of people thought Johnny Augustine should have taken over as the starter at that point. But Oliveira hit a different switch in the second half of the season there. So All the skill players on offense, I think, are pretty sound this year. I do have some concerns over the aging offensive line for Winnipeg, though, which, then that throws a lot of the stuff into the balance. You got quite a few guys there that are, mid, late 30s. But you also have some younger pieces and Jeff Gray and Liam Dobson that are going to be filling in new roles there also.
And that's been the hallmark of the team. Stanley Bryant and Jamarcus Hardrick building out from there a little bit, but they seem to have some guys waiting in the wings, like Chris Kolankowski comes in a relief role, I guess we'll say, last year, and fit in like he had been there for years. The guy is 31 years old. He looks like he's about 39. The long hair, the beard. He looks like a leathered or a weathered offensive lineman, but really kind of new to the starting lineup for the Bombers last year, and he looked great.
Yeah, he filled in after Michael Couture went down due to injury and looked pretty solid, and just kind of handed an easy offseason option to the Bombers on a silver platter. Of Couture was probably going to demand quite a bit of money potentially there to bring him back for another year. You have to think maybe you get a bit of a discount with Kolankowski, and that allows you perhaps bring in a guy like Kenny Lawler and other additions. So yeah, huge piece for them to be able to get a guy to quickly sub in the lineup there.
Now, I feel like kicking has been a thing in Winnipeg.
Oh, no, we don't talk about that.
Ever since Justin Medlock left, really. Now, we're recording this before the final preseason game, and Sergio Castillo is back with Winnipeg. 5 field goals in the 2021 Grey Cup, but there were a couple field goal incidents in 2022, including the championship. But then Leggio, I remember Labor Day, a 55-yarder. So he does have the talent and he does have the leg to get it done. Is that something Bomber fans are watching going into the year?
Yeah, the kicking position is the focal point of everybody's interest. I think at one point they brought 7 to 10 kickers into camp something like that. Or so I had heard, mix of kickers and punters for different roles originally. That was before Sergio Castillo became available and they snapped him up within 7 minutes of him being released or whatever it was. I think Mike O'Shea, if it was fully his decision, he's a loyal guy. He backs his players. I could see him wanting to give Leggio another chance at the kicking duties, but you have to think some of the outside pressure, it's everything the fans are talking about as well, maybe played a role into, okay, let's see some other options, get some competition in there. I don't think Leggio had a bad season. Yeah, he was only at 82% kicking. I think that was second worst in the league there last season, but it was a tremendous improvement over the year before. And I have to wonder what another year of kicking duties would bring for him this year. But you have to think if they're bringing Castillo in, that it likely is for him to handle the kicking duties. They trusted him to, he should have been the MVP in the 2021 Grey Cup, I would argue. I still think he was robbed of that award there, but I would have to imagine he's going to handle the main kicking duties this year, but maybe Leggio, it's Canadian. He can handle the punting duties there. I thought he was a better punter than he was a place kicker last season. He had some good coffin corner punts there. So maybe giving him the opportunity to just focus on that role, get a good 1-2 punch between the two.
Now, we did mention Nick Dembski and the receivers a little bit last year. It was a career year for him. 772 yards, 10 touchdowns, and the majority of that was sort of in the back half of the season. He was injured for a portion of the year. This feels like this could be the year where teams are going to have to pay attention to Dembski, obviously, but with Lawler and Schoen there, that if that's a 1-2-3, you're as happy as anybody else in the CFL. Can we see 1,000 yards for Dembski?
I think so. I think Dembski, the sky is the limit. Especially if you want to go ahead and add in his rushing yards to it as well. How many receivers put up 150 rushing yards in a season? The Bombers are at their best when Dembski is heavily involved, whether it's a quick dump pass and let him make a move, or it's fine, whether it's finding him over the top, over the middle, or just handing it off to him in the backfield. I mean, he does everything in that offense. He's got the nose for the end zone, like you mentioned there with the touchdown. So, if you got to keep tabs on all these other guys, there's going to be some space for Dembski to get the ball there. And it's hard to gauge with these talented receivers, how many of them are going to have those 1,000-yard seasons. Somebody's going to end up with what we consider, sadly, a disappointing year, I think, because, there's just only so much to go around. Collaros doesn't pass for a lot of game either. He's very few games over 300 yards. So I think Dembski has the capability to hit 1,000 yards. I'm just not sure with the workload in this offense. I could see him falling a little bit short there.
Now, are there going to be some names that maybe the rest of the league isn't too familiar with that we could see make themselves known in 2023? I know they're a very veteran-heavy roster, and maybe there isn't always the biggest opportunity for a new face to come in, but hey, it could be a DB, it could be somebody. What do you think on that front?
Yeah, my first attention goes to the defensive line. I mean, you've got Willie Jefferson, you've got Jackson Jeffcoat. Those are two of the best in the business when they're healthy. They're also getting up there in age, and Jackson Jeffcoat, last season only played 12 games. So you're going to have different guys starting to rotate in there. They've got some young pieces, Anthony Bennett, they just drafted in the draft this year. I think he was their first round pick on the defensive line. Maybe we start seeing him get a little more involved there. With Casey Sales going off to Hamilton, Ricky Walker, I think, is slotted in as the guy who's going to get a shot on that D-line there. Offensive side of the ball, it's hard to see any new names that are going to necessarily stand out just because of all the pieces we have in there. I mean, if guys do go down due to injury, Brendan O'Leary-Orange had a good year filling in last year. Carlton Agudosi had a monstrous first game with 2 touchdowns and 70 yards, and then got injured and missed the rest of the season. So, this team, more than most, there's not going to be too many fresh faces and new names we see making an impact. But there will probably be guys rotating in that we'll at least learn their names of a little bit here and there.
I think for the defense, getting to the quarterback like they did in 2021 and before is probably a key to the year for the Bombers. You are big into CFL fantasy. Is there going to be a Bomber that you're going to try to get into your lineup every week?
Oh, every week for me with the Bombers.
They might get expensive.
It's going to get expensive real quick. Yeah, can we start with last year's salaries with Dalton Schoen starting at $2,500?
No kidding.
No, I think it's going to be hard to gauge early in the season, and that's generally my problem with a lot of these teams that have good depth is who's going to get the ball, because based on names alone, if we're talking fantasy pricing, these guys are going to be up there in price, probably not going to be worth the money unless they're full in the price there. So I like Oliveira's potential at running back as I think a guy that could get some heavy usage this year. But probably early in the season, unless the pricing's really good, I think there's other teams where I could pinpoint maybe a better dominant force that's going to take most of the team's load and not spread the ball around.
Well, Ryan, thanks for coming on 2 and Out to talk Winnipeg Blue Bombers for 2023. Where can we find you now?
Yeah, if you want to hear more of what I have to say, first of all, wow. Second of all, if I haven't turned you away yet, you can check out the Canadian Football Countdown on all your favorite podcast platforms over on YouTube as well. We live stream our shows every week. We're doing a show every Wednesday night, pretty late at night because, dad duty. So I've got other things that make it late at night, but you can find it, just search the Canadian Football Countdown anywhere. Also on social media at cfcountdownpod. And if you want to follow me individually, it's at CooperTrooper42 on Twitter. I don't really tweet much, but feel free to do so.
Any cameos from the little one?
No, sorry. I don't know where they are right now.
Yeah, you just let him run free. Free range.
I'm not on parenting duty right now.
Okay. Ryan, thanks for coming on the show.
Always a pleasure, Travis.
And joining the show now to talk Saskatchewan Roughriders is Safimod from the Piffles podcast. Thanks for coming on the show, Saf.
Oh, it's absolutely my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
All right. Last year, the Riders 6-12. They ended the season on 7 consecutive losses. It kind of looked like it was going to be a promising year, and then things just took a turn for the worse. We'll probably put it right around the Ottawa game. We know the one we're talking about. But if we're talking just not drama and just strictly things on the field, the offensive line was probably the biggest concern coming into 2023. Do you think that's been addressed?
It's funny you mentioned that Ottawa game. You can look back to a specific play where that season turned around, but we'll leave that in the past. That's thank God. You know, I have to say they have to have improved. I mean, the addition of Blake, Godber at center. Yeah, we lost Dan Clark, but I think Godber is an improvement at that position. And they don't have literal pylons playing at the tackle positions. That's really what it comes down to. My one concern right now is still that spot between Furland and Johnson. And as we're recording today, there were practices with Blake out at right tackle, which put both Johnson and Furland at the guard position. Furland I'm okay with, but we've seen over the last year, Evan Johnson just doesn't have it. I don't know what it is. I do appreciate his fire coming out of last game after that hit on, was it Patterson that got decked? I think it was Patterson that got the late hit. In the preseason game. And, Johnson came to his defense and took the 15-yard penalty, which I'm in favor of. You got to defend your quarterback. But beyond that, he's been invisible for over a year now. So if he's on the starting lineup come game 1, it's still a concern for me. But if they can find those tackles to run out Godber, Blake, and Furland as their interior, I'm not worried.
Now, ending the season with 7 losses in a row, we know how emotions fly high in Saskatchewan. And it can be a roller coaster at times. And as a Rough Rider fan, I'm familiar with Rider math, always trying to find a way to squeak into the playoffs, or we're all tied for first at this point in the season. But it did seem like as the offseason went underway and some changes started to happen, I know Cody Fajardo off to Montreal, Trevor Harris coming in, it does seem there's a bit of a more positive feeling going into the season compared to the way last year ended.
I have to agree. There seems to be that hope again in Rider Nation. Now, it's not translating right now to ticket sales, which is a little bit concerning, but there seems to be some positivity about those that are following the team at least. And going back to the O-line, Trevor Harris might actually be the best improvement to our offensive line. He's a guy that knows the game, knows how to get rid of the ball, and most importantly, knows how to make his reads rather than just panicking and running. I love Cody Fajardo. We worked with him on a charity project. Great dude, but it was time for him to move on. I think for both sides, his time here was over. And bringing in Harris is just a great improvement for that offense.
Well, and that being said, this is a big season for both Jeremy O'Day and Craig Dickinson. What do you think they need to do to stay in the job? Is it as simple as just getting into the playoffs again, or there need to be a little bit more success than that?
I think a home playoff game is the minimum line, given how last year went and the issues that we've had, excuse me, can point to both the general manager not finding the right players and the head coach not instilling any kind of discipline in that locker room. You can pinpoint a lot of issues from last season on those two guys. So they're 100% in the hot seat. And if those don't improve, it doesn't matter how well we do. I think they're gone. Now, obviously, win a Grey Cup, it's gonna make everybody feel better, and they're gonna stick around and probably sign 4-year extensions because winning cures everything. But outside of a home playoff game, I don't see them lasting through the season. And if we start off ugly, if the season doesn't come out the way we hope it does, I'm not sure Dickinson makes it to Labor Day.
So that being said, I mean, all the reports you see out of training camp are just that, training camp. And I think even last year, Dickinson really had his team, seeing eye to eye, getting along. They had a really good, tight chemistry. Now, does that translate to discipline? Does that have to be the biggest focus of the team on the field? Of course, you want to score more points than the other team, but some of the penalty yards that were put up last year were just off the charts, man. And some of those players that maybe had the discipline issues are now gone. So maybe that will help the roster. What do you think of that?
Not naming any names, Duke Williams, but no, it's absolutely correct. But then look to the first preseason game. We took 4 major penalties again. Now, in fairness, I did say 2 of those were penalties I absolutely support. You knock a quarterback the way the BC did. I don't mind if all 12 guys on the field come, throwing hands at that point. But it was concerning. We only took 7 penalties, but 4 majors. It's, we'll see how that goes. He's harped in the media over the last couple of weeks, very particularly mentioning discipline as the area that he needs to work on. And he needs to find himself in that locker room more and to instill that discipline, because he made comments last season that the locker room wasn't where he belonged, that was the players' room, which is odd for me as a head coach to stay out of the locker room. Like, that's where you are the boss. You control that room, and he didn't last year. So let's see what he does this year. I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt, and it's still a preseason game. Penalties don't matter, but come week 1, if we see a bunch of majors and issues right out of the gate, that's a major concern to me.
Where else do you think the team needed improvement? I remember starting 2022, the Riders looked like they had a championship level defense. And then as the season went on, it was just the D-line was able to give up tons of rushing yards. Maybe they were just worn down, but what are you seeing on the defensive side of the ball coming into 2023?
To me, the one issue on the defense is why can't I remember his name? My Lord. The linebacker that went to the XFL. This is terrible.
Oh, Sankey.
Thank you. It's too early for you. It might be too early for me. The loss of Sankey is the one concern for me on that D line. They improved the D line again. They made some improvements there, but Sankey was a big part of why they had some success in that linebacking core. He showed in Calgary why he was a number 1 linebacker. He came here and did the exact same thing. That's a big hole to fill, and I'm not sure that they have anybody that can fill his shoes. But a linebacking core by committee with, you look at, you guys still have Derek Moncrief. You've still got Larry Dean. You've got Micah Tights coming back off injury. I think they've done enough. The defense doesn't really worry me outside of who can fill Sankey's shoes. Because you mentioned it. The biggest issue I think last year that they had was the offense did nothing. The defense was on the field. It seems like 3/4 of the game. Of course they're gonna give up yards. They're gonna give up points. There's no way around that when your offense is performing as poorly as they did in 2022.
No, I look at the schedule. It's almost like the Riders are starting in the playoffs. Like, O'Day and Dickinson need to win, and they're starting against Edmonton, Winnipeg, Calgary, Edmonton, Calgary. I mean, to start this, and then BC. So they play the entire West Division within the first 7 weeks of the season. If we're going to know what the team's going to be. Last year, it was East heavy to start the year for the Riders, and they got some wins. This year, West heavy. Like, is Dickinson going to be in the chair by Labor Day?
Well, that's just it. They can find themselves on the outside looking in 6 games into the year with a schedule like that. Calgary is a perennial winner. We like to talk about them falling off year after year, but they never seem to. Edmonton has to be better. the odds they win a game at home for once is very high. You know, you can't lose 3 years in a row at home. Can you? I mean, I hope so, but can you?
And that's a big one. I mean, the guaranteed win night, the first game of the year at Commonwealth,
those never work. You might as well have just handed the Riders a victory. Guaranteed win nights are a terrible, terrible choice. Although I like what Edmonton did with it, where if you don't see a win, your ticket comes back next year. And as a stadium as big as theirs, they can get away with that.
I think that's so cool. And I've grown up going to games at Commonwealth, and the amount of losses I've seen as a green and white fan on that turf. So I never go into Edmonton expecting a win. So for that to open the season, I feel like that also has been circled on Saskatchewan's calendar. You're going to guarantee the win against us. If they're not fired up for that, something's got to be wrong.
Oh, absolutely. If you're in that locker room and you're not marking down that game as a confidence booster, you're doing something wrong. You're probably in the wrong profession at that point. Like how that's as easy a bulletin board material as you can put up.
Yeah. I try to, stay positive and not talk, off the field ticket sales as much as maybe some other people do, but it sounds surprising. And I don't think people around the CFL or fans around the CFL really believe it, but maybe there is some attendance issues or ticket sales issues in Saskatchewan. Relatively speaking, still great. But I think Rider fans maybe don't like being number 2 to Winnipeg as far as attendance going. Maybe that is the biggest offense in all of
Isn't
this.
it though? We can come in second to Edmonton. That's fine. They've got a 60,000 person
and
stadium.
For years, that's what it was.
Yep. But coming in second to Winnipeg in attendance is wrong.
Yeah, we got to figure this out.
Yeah.
So,
but don't you dare say anything about Kim Mitchell on Twitter, or you will have your notifications ruined for weeks.
Hey, I love.
I'm
Kim
just
Mitchell.
telling you right now. Hey, I'm a Kim Mitchell fan. I dude's a legend. But if you say anything negative about him being the home opener concert, oh Lord. I made mistakes.
Now, yeah, I guess people showed you what was up. Now, maybe those are the people that are currently attending the games. So it's there to entertain them. But will it bring new people into the stadium? Is it just the fact that Mosaic Stadium, I think we've reached the point we don't have to call it new Mosaic anymore. Maybe it's just not as shiny as it once was. We even saw Grey Cup attendance issues. I mean, in the past, if we go back to 95 or the 2003 Grey Cups, people in Regina would come out and support it because it was the league. It was a big event in the community.
Yeah.
This time around, it's like, well, if the Riders aren't in it, I'm not in it. And that's a bit of a change and a bit of, I think, a mindset shift in people of Saskatchewan.
I can tell you exactly when that change happened. It was as soon as we won the Grey Cup in 2007. We weren't the lovable losers, and we got a completely different fan base at that point. We had people that suddenly, you're the champions, and we went through a period of fairly decent success, especially for Saskatchewan.
Yeah.
3 Grey Cup appearances in 4 years, 2 Grey Cups in 6 years. We don't do that. That's not how Saskatchewan rolls on the field. And I think the fans that came in at that point, rather than the CFL fans of years past, were Rider fans, which is great. We needed that too, but it's not going to sell. It's not going to sell Grey Cup tickets, and it's certainly not going to sell tickets when the team isn't performing, because those fans that came in, and not pointing at anybody in particular, just a general look, they're going to be fair weather fans. They came in on success. They're the type that, they were Tom Brady fans, so they were Patriots fans. Suddenly they're Buccaneers fans. Now they're looking for a new team. Maybe they're Bills fans because they're good, right? You see that time and again in markets, and I think that's what happened to us in 2007. And it just kind of carried on. And then you get the new stadium and, oh, there's something shiny and new and fun and exciting. And, this is Regina. We don't get stadiums that look like that.
It doesn't
right?
look like it belongs.
No, right? Like that's not what we do here. But after 6-7 years, it's just part of the city now. It's not, they have to do something about the game day experience. They have to make people want to come to the game, because seeing the new stadium isn't doing it anymore. And the team, with the lack of success last year, especially in a Grey Cup year, that's going to rub those fair weather fans, especially, the wrong way. Those casual fans spent a lot of money coming out to, games last year.
Yeah.
To be disappointed. They're not going to want to do that again unless they start to see success. And we said it before, winning cures everything, right?
It's funny because I think about the old times, and we don't want to long for those days of, 22 years of missing the playoffs and having telethons to save the team. But this current generation of Rough Rider fan hadn't experienced that.
Nope.
It feels like the Riders are going to be here forever and the league's going to be here forever. But we found out during COVID, and we found out in the past that, hey, this is something we got to, support if we want to see it stick around in our communities, right?
Well, if you look from that 22 years of no playoffs or no success, and all of a sudden, from 2007 to last year, how many times did we miss the playoffs?
Yeah, it's
2, 3.
Yeah, 2011, and then 2015. Yeah, so
right, like that is not a level of success that those of us who have been fans longer than the 2007 title have ever experienced. Like you, I grew up in the 80s and 90s where you could lay across a bench at Mosaic or at Taylor Field and still have a good 10 feet to the next guy, right? Like,
bring your own cooler, like,
yeah. Oh,
hey,
a
that
lot
would
better
be
than the
nice
beer
now.
prices they're charging now. Oh, $12 for a craft beer.
Wow.
$12. But hey, they got $5 menu items now.
Yeah.
So you can have some French fries.
That almost gets you, a 4-pack of tall boy crafts. So
right.
That's I guess the world we live. They got to pay off the shiny stadium somehow, right?
Right. Yeah. Especially if ticket sales aren't doing great, they got to find other avenues to bring that money in, because you don't have that $11 service fee, right? Yeah.
Exactly. The 2023 Saskatchewan Roughriders, it's kind of a mixed bag, a wait and see approach going into the season, but a big season for those involved. And I mean, hey, Trevor Harris brings a positive energy with him. It looks like he's kind of ready to take on the task as the starting quarterback, but also the new offensive coordinator as well. So there's still a lot of question marks, isn't there?
Yeah, well, given last year, all we talked about all year long was, hey, the running game works. Let's try it for all 4 quarters instead of having success in first and second and never seeing the running backs again. Suddenly our running backs coach is our OC. Yeah. I like this. I would love to see that combo run 50% of the plays. Like we had a successful running game that we just avoided last year for no reason. And when you have a weak O-line, you need to run the ball to keep the defense honest. We didn't do that. We just let them pin their ears back and half murder Cody Fajardo. So, you go into this year with him as the OC. I love it.
Oh, nice.
If he sticks to, his running game, if he actually uses the running game, which you would think a running backs coach would like his running backs, but hey, the one thing that concerns me is he is our 7th pick for OC, right? Like we went through we ran through the gauntlet of potential offensive coordinators before settling on him. But you know what? This is one convenience hire I don't mind. I think he's well respected across the league. He's put in his dues. Let's see what he's got. What's the worst that happens? Because you're not going to get somebody with I hate the term, but lame duck GM and head coach, right? You're not going to get somebody who is going to move up.
Yeah.
So this gives him a chance to hitch his wagon to, not necessarily a dying pair, but to to an unknown. And if it works, they're all successful. If it doesn't work, we clear the roster next year and start fresh.
That running game will be put to the test week 1 against Edmonton. Jake Seresna and the rest of that Edmonton front. Trevor Harris against his old team. Chris Jones against his old team. And a guaranteed win for the Elks. That's going to be a fun way to start the season. The Piffles Podcast, where can we find you every week, Saf?
You can find us at on Spotify, Apple Music, all the good stuff at Piffles Podcast, or check us out, pifflespodcast.com. We're trying to keep things interesting online too, with the articles as often as we can throw them out there.
Awesome. Hey, thanks for coming on the show to talk Riders going into 2023.
Hey, it's my pleasure, Travis, anytime.
Joining the show now is Andrew from 3downnation.com, a recent addition there, and the Turf District. Thanks for coming on to talk Elks for a little bit, Andrew.
Absolutely. I love talking to you guys. I'm glad we're back talking football again. Although, Travis, I do have a small bone to pick with you, and that is that there's a preseason game. You're at it, but you did not come down to west of us. I mean, I got them to put the Popeyes right at west of us.
That's
and you
why
still didn't
I
come
avoided
down.
it.
I'm
That
like,
is
come
why
on.
I avoided
It's
it.
a double-edged sword. It's a double-edged sword.
I can only afford so many $14 chicken sandwiches, man.
Just don't get the fish.
Here, I thought I was worth it. Nope. I've learned my lesson. It's okay.
I'll see you on guaranteed win night. I promise.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Excellent. I appreciate that.
2030.
Hey, now. Come on.
2022 for the Edmonton Elks had them at 4-14, 5th in the West. But that is last year. This year, Taylor Cornelius goes in knowing that he is the man behind center. Have you seen a change in him at all in this year's training camp, knowing that he's the guy?
Yeah, watching a little bit more in practice and, of course, in the preseason game, series? He really only played 3 series. He didn't play a whole lot. But definitely in practice, there is a calm about him. There is a little bit more of a poise about him that we weren't seeing before, where there was a little, I don't want to say panic, but it definitely fear. And especially in that game against Winnipeg, he was under pressure a lot in those 3 series, and there wasn't the, the panicked throw. There wasn't the, I'm going to just fire it in and hope for the best. It was good decision making. There's only one time where I thought that he had the chance where he could have just run, but I think because it's a preseason game, I think he was told, don't just throw the ball and hope it gets in there. Mm-hmm. So I have seen some progression. Obviously, it'll be different when the Bullets are live and it's a regular season game, and that it's not quite such a vanilla offense. But I have seen in practice, he definitely looks like he stepped forward, and some of the throws in practice have been in tight windows and they've been sneaking him in there. Dylan Mitchell and Eugene Lewis definitely help. If you can get it within 5 yards, they'll find a way to catch it, and that will help him as well. But I think he has got that leadership style. One other thing that we did see in one time was Dylan Mitchell went up for a pass, came down, got hurt somehow, not really sure what, but he was really frustrated about it, and he was kind of on his own. He was yelling, he was really upset, and then as he kind of came down, Taylor came over to him, and that was that leadership role that we can now see him taking on, and kind of put his arm around him and be like, hey, this is what happened, and this is what's going on here, and this, you got to be professional. This is how we work on this. And that's a different thing that we didn't see him do before. So I think there's progression all the way around. I'm excited to see when it's live.
Out is Kenny Lawler. In is Geno Lewis. In is Kyron Moore. In is Maurice French. In is Stephen Dunbar. And I mean, a full season of Dylan Mitchell, you mentioned, and also Kevin Brown. I think there is some excitement ahead for the Elks offense.
Well, there is this one thing that we have not always had. It's called hope. A different four-letter word than, I mean, everybody has it at this time of year.
I thought you were going to say cover team.
Okay, Ty, can you cut him off? Like, is it okay? Like, we could do that at this point, right? Like, again, here, I thought we
People
were
have tried. People have tried.
That's right. I'm sure there's a button on here where I can mute you. But the fact of the matter is that a completely different four-letter word than what we're used to, and in having some hope. I think not only Kevin Brown, but Shannon Brooks gives us that kind of 1-2 punch at a running back, which we're thinking, wow, they really make something out of nothing, which is amazing. So I'm excited to see them. And then this receiving core is, now I never want to get too excited, because I go back to 2021, and everyone was like, oh, the Elks receiving core is going to be out of this world. They got Trevor Harris, they got Greg Ellingson, they got Durrell Walker, they got all that. 3 wins. So this receiving core is exciting. We have basically the MOP from the East now out here in the West. And is that going to make that difference? I do think having Dylan Mitchell and Eugene Lewis will draw a lot of attention and open up guys like Moore and Dunbar and Arsenault. And don't rule out Gavin Cobb as the Canadian that will be playing in the receiving core. The kid's got speed, and he's coming back from a big injury, so you're starting to see him progress as well. I'm excited for that receiving core. It should be very well done. The only thing that makes me nervous about the offense, can the offensive line take the step forward? We've seen it in Cordy. We've seen it in TJK. I've seen them take that step forward. Martez Ivy back at practice now, so at least that we know that might help on the left side. I'm jury's still a bit out. I'm hoping that they will be able to improve enough to make this offense really click.
It's funny, Stephen McAdoo hasn't really struck me as a guy that has a super creative offense, really. But now there's Trey
now
Ford.
You're quiet, Ty. Come on.
Trey Ford has
only do so much.
The athletic ability that he showed in the final preseason game against Winnipeg, and then the quarter receiver back. I think that's what he called himself, Kai Loxley.
Correct.
How are they going to be able to utilize all these guys? It's there's a lot of athletes there, and that I know that's what Jones loves.
Yeah, and I don't think that they have to use all these guys. I think that's the thing, is that it's Taylor's team. Let him run with it. Now, does Trey have some things to offer? Absolutely. But it's not a bad thing for him to take another year to have the game slow down for him either, because if you, in that second quarter when he came in, he looked quite rattled in the preseason game. It was a lot of high speed, and when they started the second half, he seemed to calm back into what we had seen more in practice, and that he was doing a little bit better. So I don't think it has to be that he needs to have a bunch of reps. What I do want to see is him being able to watch the game, do the full practices for the full year, because last year he missed a lot with that injury. And the quarter receiver back, there's your third down guy, right? And the nice thing with him being that is that at any point he could turn and throw, or he could do the lean in, or he could run. So there could be some imagination there. Again, Stephen McAdoo, not really known for that, but I do think that they could use him in that. I think back to 2015, where we had Jordan Lynch, I believe was his name, and he was the third quarterback and athletic guy. He played on special teams, third quarterback playing on special teams. Weird. So I think there's not spots where they have to put guys in, but there's spots where they can use them and see what happens.
So Chris Jones, obviously not really regarded as an offensive mastermind when it comes to coaching. He builds defenses, and that was obviously what you could see over the last season in a bit. of him cutting guys, getting guys in that he wants. You have Toby Antigua. You have guys like Jake Serezna, Ed Gainey, who's maybe lost a step, but playmakers like Luchez Perifoy in that secondary. Is there a guy that you see kind of not becoming a leader, but becoming like a standout guy in this defense, or is it going to kind of be like by committee?
The guy to watch, there's two that I will mention. The first one is Niles Morgan, who is now back for an entire season after being injured for a lot of last season. When he played last year, the run was almost negated for other teams, and he is going to have a monster year, and he's taking on that leadership role, not only on the defense, but off the field too. He's the first guy that's out with all the kids coming to get their signatures at the end of the game. So I think he's really embraced taking on that role, and I think he's going to be huge. The other one is Enoch Maconzo. He made 2 gigantic plays in the first couple of series in the preseason game, and then he sat the rest of the game because it's preseason. But in camp, he has had a number of interceptions. The team rallies around him. He's taken a big step. So I think those are the 2 guys that I'd really keep an eye on. Of course, we're all hoping for the return of Aaron Grimes in that secondary, but again, he's still coming off that injury, so I don't know if we'll see him right up front. But Morgan and Maconzo, I'd keep my eyes on those ones.
I feel like there are 2 goals for the Elks this year. It's probably have a return touchdown and win a game at home. Is that fair?
Those are lofty goals, but I like both. I think the win at home, I think, will happen quickly. The team is, I don't want to, say for sure this is when it's going to happen. I'm not that kind of a fan, but they say guaranteed win night. I say maybe win night. That'd be great. But they have taken enough steps that I think the home win will come. Much like any other team that Chris Jones has taken over, by year 2, you see that progression. You see the guys taking the next step, and you see the gelling happen. And I think there will be more wins, and they will include some home wins, which is exciting. Now, as far as a return touchdown is concerned, I think it's probably better if we leave that goal till next year.
Will we get to
let's do
Mars?
one goal at a time.
Baby steps.
Baby steps.
Will
That's
mankind make it to Mars, or will the Elks have a return touchdown?
Will Travis and I see 50?
Okay, if you were going to say that I saw 50, I'd be like, well, I mean, it's a close race. I'm a lot closer than you guys. So it's pretty good. But I would, you know what? It's just an ongoing thing, and you bring in the returners and guys that have speed. You look at CJ Sims, he's shown he's got a ton of speed. Gavin Cobb was a returner all the way back when he was playing in Victoria and with the Bisons. We've got guys that have speed. I just don't know how they can get to the blocking, and that's been the biggest issue. So until we know, and they have the regular guys doing the blocking, because in every preseason game, every blocking setup was different. There was a different guy in there. When you have the steady force, we'll see. I am happy about guys like Michael Broderick, who I think will make a really big impact on special teams. He's got a motor that doesn't stop, and he's a giant dude. So I'm excited to see what he can do out there. Am I going to go so far as saying that they get the return touchdown and Chris Agar has to cut his hair? I'm hopeful that he's bald by the end of the year at some point, but I'm not going to hold all my confidence in it.
Okay, I haven't locked in my official picks yet, but I see the Elks contending for a home playoff game here. It's just what I see. I know it's a big step forward from last year's 4 wins, and you need to win home games for that to happen. Is it as simple? And I did ask Ryan from Go Stamps Go about the off the field stuff in Calgary. Is it as simple as winning games at Commonwealth Stadium to get folks in Edmonton back in the stands in full force?
It is not that simple. It is absolutely a portion of it. When you have a team that wins and you have a team that's exciting to watch, you want to be there more. So obviously that plays a role. Some of the things, though, that they did in this past game make me start to think that they're thinking about getting other things off the field that are going to help people in. They've almost doubled the size of the tailgate, and for a preseason game, it was busy. I was actually really impressed with how many people were out at the tailgate. So that's a great step. I really loved, and I understand that their theme for the preseason game was you're new to football, but they had the football 101 videos where they were explaining the game to people who'd never been to the game before. When there was a penalty called, while they were showing the replay, they, on the bottom of the screen, they'd have the ref doing whatever the signal is and explaining what the penalty is. And little things like that will help people who are just coming to see, be part of a theme or see a concert or do whatever, but I'm coming to the football game. It's a nice night. These little things would help you learn the game and then appreciate what the game is too. But again, like I said at the beginning, the big part of that is if it's a crappy team to watch, well, then why would you want to spend your time? So I think this year they do make the step on the field. I'm not quite as confident as you, Travis. I think they will make the playoffs, but I don't think there'll be a home playoff. If they get a home playoff, I'll be ecstatic, but I'm not of that camp as of yet. But I do think that this combination of having the better play on the field and then starting to do these little things that will teach fans and help fans want to be part of it more, I think that will absolutely help.
I've always wanted to go to one of those football 101 classes and just be like the star pupil, but just like act like I didn't know what I was doing when I walked through the door.
Wait a minute. Act like you don't know what you're doing?
Hey.
That was fair.
What are we on the golf course here? That's
Not if I'm playing you, because I'm absolutely I'm way behind on that lesson. Yeah.
On that note, Andrew, the Turf District, thanks for coming on to talk Elks for 2023. You're releasing a weekly show and a weekly column. Let us know what you're doing this year.
Absolutely. So yes, we've got the weekly show with the Turf District, and you can join us on YouTube live, usually 8:30 on a Tuesday night, and we get in a guest, or we have the three of us and chat football and everything, Elks and the CFL, and then the podcast comes out in audio version usually the next day, and then every day, good Lord, I'm really making it hard on myself. Every week after the game, I'll put my thoughts out on the previous game on 3 Down Nation, so you can follow us there and follow us on all the stuff. It's at the Turf District or at Freepolicious.
Hey, thanks for coming by. I'll see you at a Popeyes at a Commonwealth Stadium near you soon. All right.
I like this. You better come back. You better come down, man. We miss you.
And joining the show now from 3downnation.com and the Go Stamps Go podcast, he even has the hair color to support the red and white. It's Ryan Ballantyne. It's good to see your face again, man.
Yeah, good to see you too. Even a little more white is starting to sneak into my beard than there was before. So I'm truly becoming, like I'm getting that new uniform look. As I get a little more white in the beard, as I get a little older, but yeah, man, it's good to be back. I'm glad to hear that the 2 and Out podcast is still here.
The retirement sucks tour.
I don't know. I don't care for those rumblings, Travis. We need the 2 and Out show to keep going.
We'll see in November. Now, it's usually boring to talk about the Stampeders every offseason because they're just solid every single year. And last year, and maybe this offseason, is just an offseason of change. No longer is Bo Levi Mitchell in red and white. It feels weird to say, and he's not even going to be visiting McMahon this year, which is actually a crime in CFL circles. I would love to see them play each other at Tim Hortons Field in November. That's my dream Grey Cup matchup. But the feeling in Calgary this year, you wrote a piece this offseason about the decline in season ticket numbers in Calgary. I mean, what's the feeling among Stampeder fans heading into 2023?
I think the Stampeders, I don't want to say that they're victims of their own success, but I think they're victims of their own success. They've been good for 90% of 3 decades.
Yeah.
If you will. They had about 3 bad years. Otherwise, they were lights out. They were lights out for the last, they were lights out for the last 30 years. And they're always in the mix for a Grey Cup. They're always in the mix for a playoff berth, certainly. The 17 years in a row, they've made the playoffs now, which is 3 times longer than any other team's streak currently in the CFL.
Wow.
I think the next best is Winnipeg at 6. So when you think about the Calgary Stampeders, they win. They win. They make the playoffs. This is what we expect. When we had Jay McNeil, the vice president of the business operations, on the podcast earlier this offseason, he said that the COVID pandemic really struck them pretty hard, because he said on average, the Stampeders lose anywhere from 15 to 18% of their season ticket holders every single year. And then they have to go out and replace those 15 to 18% of season ticket holders. So he said we dropped 18 to 20% between 2019 2020 because of COVID, right? People, the season was canceled. So they couldn't sell tickets to replace the 20% of people that dropped off after the 2019 season. So that didn't happen. Then in the 2021 season, they didn't decide to have a season until about 2 or 3 weeks before it was supposed to happen. So that 20% of people that didn't renew after 2020, okay, well, now they're gone too. So you've lost 20% and then a further 20%. Well, now you're down 35% from the year before. And then now you're still dropping another 20% after that season before you can start to recoup. So they were at about 23,000 season ticket holders before COVID, but this 3 successive years of losing season ticket holders without having an opportunity to sell new ones, or scrambling to try and build that back, is what's really finding them in the spot they're in. So the number that Jay had at the time when he did our show was under 15,000 season ticket holders sold, but tickets sold for the first preseason game on the Monday of the May long weekend in Alberta was still 17,785. So I feel good about the idea of, they got up to 17,000 tickets sold, which isn't bad considering their season ticket base was supposed to be under 15,000. So that means that you sold an additional 3,000 tickets for your, at least 3,000 additional tickets for your preseason game on the Monday of a long weekend, when they didn't decide the game was even going to be played until 2 hours before kickoff. So I think it was an encouraging sign, but I do think it is troubled times here for the Stampeders from a ticket sales standpoint.
12-6 in 2022, which is 3rd in the West. Some years that's good enough for first. I did the math on the 6 losses. It was a point differential of 21. One of them was an overtime game. Another was a 1-point loss to BC. There were 3 losses to Winnipeg, all 1-score games. So I think on the surface, it was a better year for the Stampeders than... there was the Nathan Rourke juggernaut that earned the home playoff game for the Lions to get that semifinal. So it's not like last year was much of a disappointment for the Stampeders, but this year it's the first full year of Jake Maier. Is he a different guy in training camp, knowing that it's his team going into 2023? We're recording this before the final preseason game, and after the first one, Dickinson, he didn't hold back.
No.
When talking about his starting quarterback.
No, Dave Dickinson wasn't impressed with any of the starters, let alone Jake Maier. I think he said all of our starters were disappointing today. Now, in the red and white game, Jake Maier looked very efficient, very effective. He moved the ball. He took it down on scores. And I understand that the red and white game and actual preseason football are totally different. But nevertheless, he was completing passes, he was completing throws, and putting it into perspective. I know everybody said, oh, well, Jake Mayer this and Jake Mayer that. When you look at Jake Mayer's stats from last season, his quarterback rating, and that's the only really kind of stat that you can give when you're looking at a comparative season, because he only took over halfway through the season, it was the third highest in the league. There was Nathan Rourke number 1, Zach Caleros number 2, Jake Mayer number 3. And as you mentioned, those 3 Winnipeg games were all by a score. One of them came on a bizarre interception where Kamar Jordan had the ball in his hands, landed, and it popped off his arm like one of those little rubber pop-em toys that we have as kids. And all of a sudden it would turn into an interception instead of a touchdown. Even that, if that happens, Calgary plays at home and not on the road in the playoffs last year. So I think there are moments where there's a lot of positives to accept for this team. Yes, they were third place in the West, but they did win two-thirds of their games in a year where they replaced the starting quarterback for not being good enough. Like, let's also put that in perspective, that the bad year where the 10-season Hall of Famer, 2-time Grey Cup champ, 2-time MOP, that guy was replaced for not being good enough, and the team still went 12-6. The amount of teams that would kill for Calgary's problems in this league, I think there's a list of 8 that would kill for Calgary's problems, which is our quarterback isn't good enough this year. Oh, and by the way, we went 12-6. When Saskatchewan's quarterback isn't good enough in a year, they go 3-15. That's the difference between what happens in Calgary and what happens in other markets. When the quarterback's not good enough in other markets, they don't make the playoffs. Calgary does. Now, was Jake great in the playoffs? No. And I think he'd be the first one to say so. But, rookie kid, his second year in the CFL, first playoff game start. I mean, that just happens. I'm not overly concerned about it. And I expect him to be in the conversation among the best quarterbacks in the league this year, because Calgary's system is designed for quarterback play like Jake Mayer can deliver.
Now, I look at the rest of the offense, and he's in a pretty good position to succeed again. We got one more ride from Derek Dennis, who would have loved to have played in the playoffs last year. He was having a great year and then broke his leg. And I remember I had him on the show back last October, and he's like, he heals better. Like, he's superhuman. And he's going to be out there again, and I expect him to be playing at that same level we've become accustomed to. So Sean McEwen and the rest of the offensive line are going to keep him protected. They've got 3 starting caliber running backs. And now, last year was Malik Henry's coming out party, I think. He's only 26 years old. He's just getting started. Yeah. So I know the departure of Kamar Jordan last year wasn't what we've become accustomed to with him, but still Reggie Bagleton and Jalen Philpott is going to miss the beginning of the season here. But some good pieces in place for Jake Mayer to succeed as the season gets underway.
Yeah, I think I'm not sure about the timetable on Jalen Philpott, but if you look at the draft from the Stampeders this year, I don't know whether or not we see him at all this season. They took Cole Tucker in the first round, and I think that was going to happen before Philpott got injured anyway. But they drafted 3 receivers in this draft, and so to me that doesn't bode well for Jalen Philpott's health. I'm not a doctor. I have no inside information, but I don't know how much we see of Jalen Philpott this season, just based purely on the idea that the Stampeders drafted 3 receivers. However, I think you're right when you talk about this running team. I mean, the run game in Calgary is going to be what stirs the drink here. Guys like Kadeem Carey and Dedrick Mills and Peyton Logan, all 3 of them, as you mentioned, capable of starting, I think, on most CFL teams. I think Kadeem Carey is the best player in the league right now. He's number 1 on my TSN top 50 ballot that I'm filling out. Kadeem Carey number one with a bullet, because if I'm building a franchise right now in the CFL, the guy I want on my team first and foremost is Kadeem Carey, and I can fill out other guys around him. But I'm going to have Kadeem Carey at number one on my TSN top 50 ballot when I submit it. But I do
He's
think
almost underrated, isn't he? Like I think that Zach's going to be number one.
Zach will end up being number one, and I mean, he's number two for me. I'm not going to, Zach Collaros is number two on my ballot. But I think I could do more with, even a guy like Trevor Harris or Cody Fajardo or something with Kadeem Carey at running back than I can do with Zach Collaros and Johnny Augustine, for example. I think that the impact of Carey at running back really elevates your offense to the point where you don't need to have an absolute stud at quarterback to be successful. Now, that said, I do, Zach Collaros is a fantastic quarterback, and as long as he's protected, that'll be great. If that offensive line does not live up to the hype, we've seen what happens when Zach Collaros is on roller skates. It's not great. Zach Collaros has benefited from having a great offensive line that is only getting older in Winnipeg. So that may be a stretch. But I think when you look at Calgary's offensive weapons, I think you're right. Reggie Bagleton and Malik Henry are going to be the featured receivers in this offense. That third spot is totally up for grabs. Trey Odoms-Dukes had a couple nice catches in the red and white game last weekend. Rice and John, they have been targeting him a ton through camp. Now, he didn't make any catches in the red and white game, made no catches on 3 targets in the preseason game. So if he can't make catches in game action, he's not going to see the field. But the guy's 6'7", 250 something. Like, wow. That's like he is a massive, massive receiver. Yeah. And to me, that just screams end zone. You get into the red zone and you just float the ball up and let the tallest guy come down with it. And in a lot of cases, that's going to be Rice and John.
I think the biggest area of change, it goes without saying, is the defense. The most outstanding defensive player nominee, Sean Lemon, went to BC. He has since been released. Jameer Thurman is now out east. And I think maybe the defensive back group last year, they seemed to have a different combination every week due to injuries. Hopefully they come into this year a little bit more healthy, but defense is going to be, I think, an area that people will be watching with the Stampeders, but Brent Monson always seems to be able to put his players in a position to succeed anyway.
Yeah, last year's defense, especially in the backfield, was incredible. Like, I went through at one point and I tracked the games, and I think through 17 games, because that's when I wrote it, the Stampeders had only had the same defensive backfield starting twice. So through 17 games, they only put the same starters on the field twice because of injuries. Every other week, there were guys bouncing around from spot to spot, moving in and out of the lineup because of injury. They put up the same team twice. And yet, we're still a good pass defense. And I think that versatility and that game experience that those guys got can turn a good pass defense into a great pass defense, because now you have a lot of guys that can step in and have had real game action. Typically because of the way the cap works in the CFL, your backup guys, especially in the defensive backfield, aren't players with a lot of experience. They aren't players with, high value contracts. And so when you do have those injuries, it does become difficult to find an experienced player to back that up, who's capable of playing at that level. So the defense only got better as the year went on last year, as guys got more game experience and as they went in. Jameer Thurman is fantastic, has been fantastic for a long time, an absolute stud at the linebacker position. But let's go back a little bit. You had Jameer Thurman in that spot. Before him, you had Darnell Sankey in that spot, an absolute stud, couldn't be replaced. Then you had Corey Greenwood, who was an absolute stud, and he couldn't be replaced. And before that, you had Alex Singleton, who was an absolute stud and couldn't be replaced. maybe, just maybe, it's how the defense works to funnel guys into that spot. Because I'm not saying that those guys aren't great players, because they have been, but every time that spot gets replaced, the next Wynton McManus is even in that rotation as well. So every time that spot got replaced, it got replaced by, we don't know how good this guy's going to be. And then at the end, he's an underrated stud who should never be overlooked again. Maybe that's a byproduct of how the defense is coached. And maybe that's a byproduct of how the defense is shaped to steer guys into that direction. On the defensive line, you lose Forlarin or Malade. He gets the big money contract out in Toronto. Sean Lemon, as you mentioned, although who knows where Sean Lemon will end up, because, when the CFL gives him lemons, he just keeps making lemonade.
Hey, a veteran guy like that,
wherever he signs, he'll get 10 sacks.
If he gets to miss training camp and just play the season, I'm sure he'd be happy with that.
Yeah, and I'm sure he'd be fully capable of just stepping in.
Yeah.
So do I hope he somehow winds up back in Calgary after all the final cuts are done and they decide, hey, you know what? You can come in and be a rotational guy. That would be fantastic. I would be happy to have him back, because he was phenomenal over the last 2 seasons here in Calgary. But at the same time, Julian Hauser and James Vaughters are 2 solid guys with great CFL pedigree, and I expect them to, do what they do. And again, Calgary led the league in sacks last year. As they have most years in this Hufnagel era, Calgary gets more sacks than anybody else. They win the game on the line, offensively and defensively, and that's why Calgary's been so successful.
Is there a new Stampeder we need to be watching coming into the season here? I know it's always tough, as cuts can be some of the most unpredictable things in the CFL.
Yes. Yeah, I would have said RJ Giroux, but look at who he's behind. RJ Giroux was really good in that one preseason game, churning up 47 yards. He was the only running back to get a touchdown, but he's behind Kadeem Carey, Dedrick Mills, and Peyton Logan, and so that's a tough spot for him to be in. Interestingly, he may end up making the team as a special teamer, because in college, his last year of college, he went down to the States and played a year at safety and ended up with interceptions and fumbles and a bunch of tackles. So it could be that a guy with that kind of versatility, who can run the ball, but can also be a guy that can make tackles for you on specials, that might be a guy who sticks around. So he's an interesting roster spot for me. I don't think there's a lot of room for new starters in this defense or in this offense, but if you're looking for a camp name that might stick around, I think RJ Giroux is the guy that I'm looking at first.
Ryan Ballantyne, the Go Stamps Go podcast, and 3downnation.com. Do you have anything cooking in the pot, the slow cooker, or maybe even the air fryer you can tell us about?
Oh, I mean, metaphorically or physically?
I'm good with either. I'm hungry,
because
man.
A recent convert, the air fryer, pierogies go great in an air fryer.
Man, I was resistant to the air fryer.
Yeah,
but it's just so darn convenient. To me, it's just it's a countertop convection oven. It's not a fryer, but it can still make things happen.
It does pretty well. So for tonight, though, it's steaks, baked potatoes, and asparagus. I got the new barbecue, so I'm firing it up, and I'm ready to go. So I'm stepping away from those and getting into those. Metaphorically, we have a ton of guests that are ready to go this year. Jake Mayer recently confirmed that he wants to do the podcast, which is great, because we've had Bo Levi Mitchell on the show 3 times, and 2 of those 3 times he went on to win the Grey Cup in that season. So really pushing for Jake Mayer to come in and get a little bit of that Go Stamps Go bump that we want to give him. And you said your dream matchup is Hamilton versus Calgary in the Grey Cup, and I think you're half right. I think that would be fantastic. I want nothing to do with Bo Levi Mitchell in a Grey Cup game against Calgary. That is absolutely not something that I want to see as a Calgary fan. If Calgary doesn't make it to the Grey Cup, I'm all in on the Ticats. Get in, win the most recent cup, Get rid of this Grey Cup drought, all of that. I'm 100% behind it. I think Bob Young deserves it as an owner and everything. And I'd love to see Bo get another ring and get another MVP. That's all if Calgary is eliminated before he gets there. Otherwise, I want nothing to do with him and like go Red Blacks or something. Red Blacks, Alouettes, not the Argos because the Argos can't lose Grey Cups. And not the Ticats because I think that's destiny. So those are the two teams I can't see if Calgary gets into that Grey Cup game.
Oh, Ryan, hey, thanks for coming on the show to talk Stampeders going into 2023.
Pleasure as always, man. Hope to be back again next season to talk about the preview and any time in between.
And joining the show is the manager of communications and content with the BC Lions, Matt Baker, to talk Lions football for 2023. Thanks for coming on the show again.
Hey, my pleasure, guys. Merry Christmas.
Yeah, that's exactly what it
is.
Sorry,
happy holidays.
There we go.
Yeah, but you know what I mean.
I remember this time last year having you on the show, and the theme was cautious optimism. And, well, it ended up being a 12-6 season, a home playoff game for the BC Lions, and Nathan Rourke setting the league on fire. Of course, he is now gone, but here we are, and the Lions still have a pretty favorable quarterback situation going into 2023 with Dane Evans and Vernon Adams Jr. It seems like still losing maybe the most explosive player in the CFL. They still have this energy and fire going into the season with those two guys behind center.
Yeah, I guess, Travis, Tyrell, to start off, I mean, when we did this last year, we had no idea what was coming. I mean, yeah, we were cautiously optimistic. We were excited, and we were seeing firsthand how Nathan was taking command of the offense right through camp. And that's a guy that eats, sleeps, and breathes football, but never, I mean, if not for the injury, he was basically set to shatter all of the records set by Doug Flutie here in 1991. Yeah. But you're right. I mean, this team, great learning experience, great step for this franchise last year. And Vernon Adams Jr. Has really kind of put his stamp on this thing. Like you've probably seen the Arrow Up First and Now podcast we do. So he had a bunch of the skilled players down in Tacoma, Washington before camp. So a lot of these guys were kind of on the same page already, and that kind of really set the tone for this thing. And, you do the math. I mean, he's had an off season now. Jordan Maximic, the offensive coordinator, they've been able to sort of tailor the playbook to Vernon's abilities because Vernon came in halfway through last year, and that was a Nathan Rourke style offense. I mean, he was able to pick things up and helped us win a couple of big games to secure second place. But I'd say you go position by position, talking to our GM and our scouts. They're excited with some of these youngsters they brought in. But overall, I would have to say last year kind of set the tone for this. I mean, internally, there's a lot of optimism. 3 1,000-yard receivers coming back. A couple of veterans on defense. A Jonathan Kongbo signing a couple of weeks ago. That kind of came out of nowhere. So they're deep at a lot of positions, and I think that will bode well in what will be a tough West Division. Again, it's going to be a dogfight. But, yeah, like I said, a year better, and now they know how to win, and they'll just have to translate that.
Now, if we go to 2021, that was Michael Riley, of course, and Nathan Rourke was practicing with the team. So that maybe got him a leg up going into 2022. Yeah. Now, last year with Vernon Adams joining the team, he's practicing. He's getting used to BC Lions football. So then it's almost like a seamless transition going into this year. He's not a brand new guy. He was a part of the group last year, and now maybe some tweaks to the offense. It seems like they're able to just pick up right where they left off last year with him knowing that it's his team going into the year. And the leadership, it's hard not, I don't know how you can't like Vernon Adams Jr. The way that he connects with his teammates, and you said bringing him down to Tacoma, Washington, it seems like it's almost similar to the situation previously where he's embedded with the team halfway through the year before, and he can come and take over right where he left off this year.
Yeah, and that's what struck me last year. It's not easy to come in halfway through into a locker room that was used to one guy and used to everything that was going on. This is a guy, VA, that came in and he commanded respect right away, and it was a two-way street. One moment I've talked about a few times. Team was in Toronto, came down to a Sean White field goal attempt late to force overtime. He missed it. I think it was one of two misses he had all year. So Sean White's coming off a little ejected. The first guy that comes to console him, he runs from the other side of the bench is Vernon Adams Jr. And at that point, Vernon had been here maybe 3 weeks. It was maybe his second or third game starting. So that's all you need to know about the person. There's VA the person and VA the player. And like we said, now it is his team. He is penciled in as number one. There is some pretty good depth with Dane Evans and Dom Davis, two veterans. In Dane's case, a couple of years where he helped Hamilton get to within a game of hoisting the Grey Cup. It's not a bad position to be in. And you can argue the quarterback position, is deeper than it was last year. Due respect to Michael O'Connor and there was kind of a revolving door at the third string coming out of camp. But we're realistic here, too. No one's expecting Vernon Adams Jr. to put up the numbers that Nathan Rourke did. But he's not going to have to either because, again, 3 receivers went over 1,000 yards. There's a couple guys battling for spots here. Give me some names. Brazen Daughtry, Aiden Eberhardt. Eberhardt had a solid preseason game in Saskatchewan. Giovanni Robinson, the global draft pick, another one. How many of these guys stick around remains to be seen. A lot will depend on what happens against Calgary here on Thursday. But, realistically, you can't expect anyone to duplicate that performance of Nathan Rourke. But like I said, there's enough balance on offense. The offensive line has improved. Michael Couture, the left side, looking pretty good as well, despite losing a starting tackle in Joel Figueroa. So I think there's reason for optimism here.
Hey, James Butler was a 1,000-yard rusher last year. It kind of looks like a wide open situation in training camp as to who's going to carry the rock in 2023.
Yep. So it's down to 2. And I guess you can argue they'll both be around. It's just a matter of who's going to emerge on the active roster next week, opening in Calgary. Antonio Williams and Taquan Mazzell, 2 Americans, both with NFL experience. I think our head coach, Rick Campbell, has compared both of them to James Butler. And here's what's intriguing for me. James Butler, 2 years ago, was just that guy on a depth chart coming into camp.
Yeah.
And I remember people saying, what are you doing? In running backs, not easy to replace a 1,000-yard rusher. We get that. But at the same time, that's the salary cap world. And James Butler, given the year he had, a contract year, he was due for a big pay raise. And, you have to prioritize a couple of certain areas, offensive and defensive line. Always you try to give more there if you can. At least many of the coaches and management types I've been around go with that philosophy. So unfortunately, the casualty was losing a very good player and a very good person in James Butler. It's kind of unfortunate too, because James was kind of starting to establish himself as a good guy, good personality, involved in a lot of the team's community programs. Never turned down an interview request, really becoming a new face, team and league. It's always a battle, right? You need those new faces.
Yeah.
And, after a couple of years, he moves on, but that's a business, right? And never will begrudge a guy for going out and getting what he can on the open markets. And maybe it's a good thing he's in the East Division. Only have to deal with him a couple of times, barring a meeting in late November. And that's the intrigue, right? I mean, it's always intriguing to see how a guy will adapt and fit in another system with another staff. But I'm really excited to see one of these 2 guys emerge. And Truthfully, they didn't do much in the preseason game. Wasn't a lot going on the ground for whatever reason. Saskatchewan playing a few more starters on the defense was maybe had something to do with it. So I'd look for that as a big storyline here in the final exhibition tilt.
You mentioned 3 1,000-yard receivers returning. A big loss in that receiving core, though, was Brian Burnham this year. Maybe, wasn't exactly the guy that we were used to, for however, like the last 5, 6, 7 years. But the leadership role that he's going to leave behind, who's stepping into that, or who do you see kind of taking the reins in that aspect?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think that's a role suited for any one of those guys. I mean, Keon Hatcher, Lucky Whitehead, Dominique Rhymes. These guys are now, in Rhymes' case, 4, 5, 6 years established here since 2021. Again, major face out in the community off the field. So you're right. Not many commanded a locker room presence, much like Brian Burnham. He's one of the more impactful veterans I think I'd ever been around. I mean, working for this team, but covered this team as a radio reporter for several years, and those are few and far between. But yeah, I think any one of those guys is capable of stepping in. Javon Katoya, another one, 2019. That's a guy walked on territorial roster player from the Langley Rams, and he's become a starter in this league. He's a bit more of a quiet, lead by example type, but it doesn't have to be just one of those guys. I think you can share the pie in so many ways, and again, having a starting quarterback that's been in this league 6, 7 years now only adds more benefit to that. But yeah, Brian will sure be missed. He'll go down as one of the greatest Lions ever. Really, there's no other way of putting it. But the offense and the leadership room should hopefully be in good hands.
And shifting to the other side of the ball now on the defense, the defensive line with the signing, especially with the signing of Kongbo, was massive. You have Matthew Betts, you have David Menard there. Early on in the offseason, though, you guys signed Sean Lemon, and now just lately released him. Can you kind of touch on that? Are we allowed to get any info on that?
Is it a ratio thing?
Is it a ratio thing? Is there a game plan with that? Is there a reason?
I don't like to automatically blame the ratio. I mean, that's maybe like if in the case of Jonathan Kongbo, if that's a guy who can also play special teams, maybe. But I think, and hey, Sean's outstanding. Dealt with him now 3 different stints with the team if you count this latest one. And it's kind of funny because I was even joking with him a few days before the news came down that, it's your 3rd time as a Lion, but it's your 1st time in Kamloops. How do you like it? And he could not have been more happy with the scenery, the facilities. But Sean, he's an excellent one in my books, but I think this just speaks to the amount of quality depth that has been brought in. The challenge is to always get younger. So yeah, but Jonathan, the Kongbo signing, I think kind of would have been the turning point, the final straw when trying to trim down that roster. But there was 17 defensive linemen still after the first round of cuts. There was still no D lineman got cut in the first wave.
Okay. Sean
came a week later. And these are just names to you right now, but some of the younger Americans, a guy like Alex Changham has stuck around. He's going to try and earn a spot here. Guys that were signed from free agent camps in the negotiation list. I think it's a tribute to the scouting staff and the way some of these younger newcomers have picked up the intricacies of the CFL game in just a training camp. So, it's tough. Again, the business aspect of it, right? And who knows, maybe a team down the road that has injuries or is dealing with some shortcomings at the position. There's a veteran out there, but I have nothing but good things to say about Sean, the player and the person. It's just the silver lining is, we know there's been some good players brought in, and that's a good problem to have.
I see a lot of Canadian talent on the defense, the linebacking core, the defensive line. It seems like an area of real strength for the Lions. Are we going to see some new faces on the defense being able to make an impact right off the bat here as the season gets underway?
Well, not necessarily a new face, but the Jordan Williams trade means Ben Haladic. Ben Haladic is your starter at middle linebacker. Bo Lacumbo next to him at will. We all know Bo is what he's capable of. And you mentioned the Canadian depth is so improved that it made the Jordan Williams trade them comfortable doing it, right? Same with trading a first-round pick for Vernon Adams Jr. last year. That was a big discussion. Like, the discussion was, needed a quarterback, but feel comfortable enough parting with a first-round pick, and then you're able to recoup one back by trading Jordan. So the linebacker has been a big storyline. Back to the defensive line, Francis Bemi, first-round pick this year. He's a guy that looks the part. He's going to have a spot, whether he starts, who knows. And then in the secondary, second-rounder Sirman Harrison Bagiogo out of Guelph look good in spots. And again, special teams. You can never have too many of these guys that play special teams, and can never have too many Canadian O-linemen. We know that. Yeah. guys who can step in and play special teams, because special teams, let's not sugarcoat it, bit of an Achilles heel last year. Yeah. So I think that's a big reason they went 6 of 7 picks on defense, because a lot of those guys can learn and fit in on teams. But yeah, slowly but surely the Canadian content has definitely improved, and that's a good thing as well.
Has specials been a bit of a focus at camp here? Don Janowski had to leave the team. They bring in Mike Benavides, who, he knows his way around the BC Lions organization. Sean White, if you want to talk special teams, one of the best kickers in the league. But the cover teams in the return game lacking a little bit in 2022. Has that been a focus in training camp?
Yeah, and it's funny. I was talking to Don before he left about this very issue, and he just flat out said, we've got some better athletes in here now. Won't mention names, but a couple guys who were replaced. That's just the nature of it, right? And having Mike sort of seeming seamless, he'll slide in here. He was the club special teams coordinator for a time before he was the head coach, and that's an area that was always well disciplined and well performing when Benny was at the helm. So yeah, it's unfortunate, and we wish Don Janowski, Yano, we call him, all the best as he takes care of what's going on. But Mike Benavides happened to be a free agent, not a bad replacement at all. But I would expect and hope an improvement in that area.
Shifting to the off-field stuff with Doman and the new ownership, like the marketing around Vancouver and just in the province of BC and the grassroots stuff, can you kind of touch on like what their plan is and how they want to keep moving this forward?
Yeah, it's just been a work in progress, but I think the early returns have provided some positive reviews. You can't be out in the community too much, right? So much more of a presence, flag football, got to get the grassroots involved. And Amar is actually coaching his young son's flag football team. Nice. Farhan, TSN.ca, give him a plug. Farhan went out and did a bit of a feature. And you watch that feature, you just realize how all in he is. Because I don't know about you guys, like I started following this team because my grandparents had season tickets, and we had players come to visit me in elementary school at my school. So it's just it is the province's team, but I think having a bigger presence in Vancouver. So summertime, we have a new merch trailer goes out to Kitts Beach, wherever cool. Young people are hanging out, just having a presence, just having the Lions crest here seen where these young people are. School visits, we've got some great programs. It's a shout out to our community relations team led by Jamie Terrace. So we've launched an Indigenous youth program, part of our contributions to the Orange Shirt Society, getting some Indigenous youth involved in football, flag football. It's really about the grassroots and marketing wise. Yeah, I've heard from people who come visit from other cities saying, yeah, like I've never seen this many Lions logos in downtown Vancouver before, right? So, and that's kind of the biggest challenge. The demographics around BC Place have changed considerably. People living there, people with enough money to live there, they're not necessarily people who grew up with the Canadian Football League. I mean, it's a multicultural city. It's one of the great things about Vancouver. So, but yeah, I'm not telling you anything you don't already know, but Mr. Doman has really backed up what he said he was going to do. And you see more and more Lions merchandise out there being worn by kids. And that's the key to it. So, and if you're a kid, what more would you want than a BC Lion, a professional coming out to your football practice? And again, it's a tribute to everyone involved in the community relations side.
Now, last year when I had you on, I think the day after it was announced that One Republic would be playing the home opener, there were 30,000 people in the stands. Are there big plans for some games happening in 2023 in Vancouver?
Well, by the time this airs, I don't know when this airs, but encourage you to keep checking our website and social channels. There is an announcement coming. I can't get into it beyond that. Again, yes.
It's good news, though.
Might as well be consistent, right?
Yeah.
It's got to be Kim Mitchell. It has to be Kim Mitchell.
Ryder's got
for another team already.
Yeah.
Right? No, I just June 17th is going to be a big night.
Cool.
What we can tell you, what we have announced, we'll have backyard street party on Robson 2 days this time. So a day before the game.
Oh, wow.
That'll start. There'll be some music out there, and there will be, I believe there's plans to have a viewing party. Saskatchewan and Winnipeg are playing on the Friday night, I think. There'll be a viewing party with a screen out there on the plaza. And then the second day, that portion of the party, we announced that the Trues are going to be performing. So,
great live band. That's cool.
And then stay tuned for the main event. That should get some people talking.
That's not the main event.
No.
Oh,
yeah.
really?
Like I said, I told you, Amar, he's backed it up so far. So
all of these,
but there is. I think you guys, if you're rider guys, when Saskatchewan comes here in the summer, we're going to have a tailgate for both fan bases.
Oh, wow.
So there'll be a Rider fan tailgate and then the regular Lions tailgate. Watermelon Smash, we're calling it. So,
it's a great visual.
And here, I'll let you in on this one too. It was announced as part of our game themes, but I always get a little bit of FOMO around Labor Day because the Lions, outside of maybe playing Montreal on the Saturday, which we're doing this year, there's no traditional rival. So I think what we're trying to do is make up for that on Thanksgiving. We'll see if this catches on. So Winnipeg will be in town the Friday night of Thanksgiving or the Saturday. I think it's the Friday. I usually get to about week 2, 3, then I memorize the rest of the schedule. So forgive me, but anyway, Thanksgiving weekend, we're calling it the Gravy Bowl. So there's going to be like turkey and poutine out at the tailgate, and
nice.
We're just kind of talking internally about how cool it would be to have a regular Thanksgiving weekend home game, even if it's not on the Monday.
Yeah.
So that's one I'm excited for too.
There needs to be a trophy, a gravy boat.
Yeah. Like they do in the NFL, the winner eats turkey at midfield, right? Like I say we do that. Yeah.
I think that would be cool. Matt, thanks for coming on to the show to chat Leo's football going into 2023, and have a great season again, and we'll talk to you soon.
My pleasure, boys. Anytime.
Thank you to Matt, Andrew, Ryan, and Steven for coming on the show to preview the West Division tie. Week 1 is upon us. We have BC in Calgary, Hamilton in Winnipeg, Ottawa in Montreal, and Saskatchewan in Edmonton. Quickly, Lock in your picks.
Calgary, Hamilton, Ottawa, Edmonton.
Hamilton winning in Winnipeg, I think, is a big one.
Yeah, that's Bo's going to be a man on a mission this year until it hits Grey Cup Sunday.
I'm just going to go sweep it. The home teams.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Calgary, Winnipeg, Montreal, and Edmonton. I should mention we'll be taking part in CFL Fantasy. We will have our lineups recapped after week 1. There are a couple leagues taking part. There's the Podcasters League, and there's also a league organized to support CFL fans fight cancer. So we'll be taking part in that league, or at least I will. And I just hope that my fantasy season is miles better than last year, because
can't be any worse.
That's true.
It can't be worse than my putting was this morning.
I just had a brutal year. Now, those are the week 1 predictions. Let's lock in our predictions for the standings as the season moves on and gets underway here. So, you want me to start?
Yeah, because I did week 1 first, so you can do these first.
Okay, I don't have win totals or anything like that, just the standings. Winnipeg in first, Edmonton in second, Calgary in third, BC fourth, Saskatchewan last. The East, Hamilton, Toronto, Ottawa, Montreal. My MOP is Bo Levi Mitchell, the man on a mission.
What's your Grey Cup?
Hamilton over Calgary. Just because I want to see it.
Yeah.
It feels like they're a team of destiny, but
yeah, so were the Bruins.
I was going to say, it's also Hamilton. It could go south.
They don't get nice things.
Lock yours in, man.
Calgary, Winnipeg, Edmonton, BC, Saskatchewan.
Calgary, first in the West.
Yeah. Hamilton, Toronto, Ottawa, Montreal. Bo is your MOP. Calgary over Hamilton, Grey Cup.
Whoa! I'm hoping for that dream Grey Cup matchup at the Donut Box in November. You can rate, review, and subscribe to Two It Out on your favorite podcatcher. Throw us a couple bucks on Patreon. Take
another
a drink.
Ba-dum.
Like, comment on YouTube as well. We'll talk to you next week to recap week 1 of the 2023 CFL season.
Thanks for listening. Find more great shows like this at CF Pod Network on Twitter.